Let's sit tall and close the eyes. And just taking this moment to allow yourself to settle in. Allow yourself to connect with yourself on a deep level. Allow the breath to carry you. Into the innermost dwelling of the heart. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Breathing in. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapatigam Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanuti Pisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajinivati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagman Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And resting the hands down, fluttering the eyes open. So welcome, so good to see you all today. Another installation of the Wisdom Circle. Last week we talked about the yamas. We went back to the beginning, to these first 5 virtues or ethics that yogis are taught to instill in their life, to become foundational steps that they must follow. But it's not just the yogi. If we wish to have peace in the world, if we wish to have peace within ourselves, and if we wish to have peace between ourselves and the world, whether the world is peaceful or not, then these yamas and niyamas are the path. And it's not only yoga and Advaita Vedanta and the other traditions of the East that say this. It's every single tradition has a series of ethics. And there is a wonderful similarity between them. A wonderful similarity. So no matter what tradition a person comes from, if they go into the scriptures of that tradition, what they'll find is the work that needs to be done. And typically that work will start with nonviolence. It will start with treat others as you wish to be treated. Harm none, serve all. Do not commit acts of violence or harm to any living being. And then the rest flows from there. That's the big one. And no matter the tradition, all the other virtues support that one. Because none of the other virtues can truly be practiced without it. For example, truthfulness. Truthfulness is inherently nonviolent. Not the egoic truth, that tends to be very violent, but we're talking about the capital T truthfulness. The truthfulness of the divine, of the sacred, the truth of unity and oneness. nonviolence is inherent in that, because we can't see or realize or live unity, truthfulness of unity, when we exist in a state of violence. Because in a state of violence, we're constantly thrashing out against others, of our species and of other species. So nonviolence is inherent in truthfulness. It's inherent in non-stealing. I don't think we need to go deep there, right? It's inherent in non-grasping. It's inherent in all of the yamas and the niyamas. It's inherent in all ethics and virtues. When we come to the niyama, the second category of 5 additional virtues, we start there with cleanliness. Ahimsa, nonviolence, is inherent in cleanliness. Initially, when people hear cleanliness, they hear saucha, which translates as clean. They think, make sure you shower daily, keep your body tailored, and, be clean in that regard. But that's only the first. That's only the first interpretation. The larger interpretation is your mind. Keep your mind clean. Keep your ego clean. Keep your relationships clean. Keep your approach to life clean. Keep your diet clean. Keep your ritual practice clean. Keep your intention clean. We could go on and on. I don't have enough hands. So the cleanliness is the intention to do no harm and to take one's energy and allow that energy, as however it's expressed, to be a sanctuary of safety for oneself and for all. So no one needs to be afraid of me. That should be the way we walk through this world. No one, not even my worst enemy, needs to be afraid of me, because I will harm none. And in such a way, we purify the mind so that the thoughts are clean. Otherwise, how do we walk around? We walk around saying, well, there are these really lofty values in yoga, and I'm working really hard to live up to them. But that person pisses me off. There's always a but, So when we're not applying these virtues to the highest extent and in a marriage to nonviolence, then there's always some kind of a mess in the mind, in the ego, that has a but attached to it. There's always a resistance. So when we practice cleanliness, yes, absolutely, keep the body clean. Keep the mind clean. In keeping the mind clean, you'll know what else to keep clean. But when the mind is polluted, we let everything else go. When the mind is polluted, we say, well, I'm working on that. And it's okay to be working on things, absolutely. But in the egoic sense, that's an excuse. When we say it all the time, every time, as a justification for poor behavior, self-doubt, violence, whatever that happens to be. When we say, I'm working on it. There's a difference between, I'm working on it, and I'm working on this, accepting responsibility for it, truly diving into it, and not just sweeping it under the proverbial rug until a more convenient time. Does that make sense? Yeah. So saucha, cleanliness, this. Just think about that for a moment. What if your mind was clean? What would that feel like? It would feel like relief. It would feel like freedom. It would feel like potential, expansion, liberation even. Why would it feel that way? Well, because if the mind is clean, then the mind is not bogged down by guilt. The mind is not bogged down by jealousy, envy, accusation, worry, fret, fear. It's not bogged down by those things, at least not as much. This is a path, it's a long-term path. So if after this wisdom circle today, you all say, well, that's it, clean mind. It's not going to happen tomorrow. If it does, let me know. I want to know what your secret is. But you can do a little bit at a time. And the more that you apply cleanliness to the mind and to have the experience of the beautiful consequences of that, which might not be comfortable at first, but over time, it's a beautiful cycle that will inspire you to continue cleaning out the mind. Like, when you first open the closet door of the junk closet in spring, and you've got this great intention, you're like, I'm going to clean this closet out and keep it that way forever. First of all, that's not the truth. But you will clean it out. But when you first start, it's so overwhelming, right? It's like, oh my goodness, where am I going to put this stuff? I'm just going to throw it all away. You have all kinds of reactions, And then you have disbelief. You're like, why did I even start this? I'm not going to be able to finish this. But you keep going. You keep going because there's some part of you that as you're doing the cleaning, even though the ego is complaining, there's another part of you that says, this clean spaciousness feels good and right. So you go through and you complete, even though you thought you lacked the faith and strength to do so, you still do. Because as you go through the process, there's that voice that says, this feels so right. There's a relief. And then when the closet's all cleaned out, you close the door, and the next time you open the door, you're like, wow, that was so worth it. So worth it because I didn't get hit in the head with the broom or whatever else fell off the top shelf. So the practice of cleaning out the mind is like that. A little bit at a time. Let it build its own resiliency by proving to you the value of itself. And it will, absolutely. Just in the alleviation of these other really harsh emotions, just the alleviation of guilt itself is so huge. The alleviation of jealousy and envy, of pointing fingers, of blame, of all these things. So start to clean the mind, but start small. Don't go for the big stuff first. That's never a very good idea. Start small. Just a little something. Say, whenever the phone rings, the first thought that comes to my mind is, oh, who's bothering me now? Maybe maybe that happens to you. I don't know. Catch that thought, midair, just catch it. And say, let's turn you around a little bit. And say, I wonder who I will have the opportunity to say hello to. And say it in such a way that it lightens their moment. Just change that little one thing and see what else changes because of it. When you drive down the highway, a person passes you by, you've probably heard me say this one before, and the typical snarl, change that. Grab that thought midair and say, let's turn you around and make it a blessing. And say, may you reach your destination safely. May you reach your destination safely. And may neither you nor any other being be harmed by the speed at which you're driving. Turn it into a blessing. That will help to clean the mind too. Turn everything into a blessing. And not a sarcastic one or a snarky one. No. So funny. We do that, right? and may you get to your destination safely. It's like, no. Let it come from here, not here. Right? Keep it clean. But turn everything into a blessing. Even if you're arguing with somebody and you've totally lost it, and you're like, I'm just going to tell this person what I think. Turn that into a blessing and say something more than I'm mad at you. Say something more than I hate you. Say something more. Say, I just love you so much that I don't even know what to do with it. Take responsibility. Don't put it off on them. And in that way, acknowledging that this emotion is so big that you don't even know what to do with it, it becomes a blessing, because they don't hear you saying, I'm mad at you, you've disappointed me, I hate you, you're no good. They hear you saying, I love you so much, I don't know what to do with it. Then maybe they're going to want to show up for you in a different way too. Does that make sense? So make it all a blessing. Make it all about love. Make it all about love. When you're cleaning out your mind, you're also cleaning out your heart. When I teach yin, sometimes I'll say to students when they're in child's pose or a similar posture, I say, just imagine the space between the shoulder blades right behind the heart, that there's a little basket there, and it's a basket of your burdens. Because typically we're all like this, pushing through that space, almost like we're trying to carry that really heavy basket. So start to take one thing out at a time. Lighten that a little bit so that the heart can come forward. And as the heart gently comes forward, then it's the heart that leads the way. But if you're pushing back into that basket of burden, then it's the head that leads the way. So start to lighten the basket of burdens and let the heart come first. The heart won't lead you wrong, only the mind will. We often say, my heart's leading the way. And it's like, nope. Not if you're hurting yourself or someone else. It isn't. It's not. Stop blaming the heart. That's the ego. Someone, an acquaintance, put a little thing up on Facebook that said something to the effect of, the ego is only fighting for what it asked for and never received. I'm like, oh, slippery slope. It's not asking for anything. It's demanding, it's manipulating, it's forcing. It's not asking. The healthy ego might be asking. The healthy ego will inquire. But the unhealthy ego, which is the condition of our ego probably 90% of the time, the unhealthy ego doesn't ask for anything. It takes. It manipulates. It's very tricky. So we have to be really mindful about that and understand when it's the ego, part of the mind, versus the heart. The heart is not invested in manipulation, no matter who the person is. The heart is not invested in manipulation. The heart is invested in goodness, unity and love, compassion, empathy, and peace. The ego, different. Says, I want love, but it doesn't really want love, it wants possession. The ego says, I want peace. It doesn't really want peace, it just doesn't want inconvenience. The ego says, I want compassion. It doesn't really want compassion, it just wants to be a hero. So you have to be careful with identifying the mind and the heart as one, because they're not. They're really not. They're two very distinct aspects of you, of me, of all of us. So cleanliness. When we start practicing cleanliness, we inherently become less violent. It's just natural. We become less violent because in order to be clean, it means we must take care of ourselves. We must take care of our environment. We must take care of our body and mind. Be mindful about the influences that we are allowing close to us. And in doing so, healthy boundaries are automatically created. Healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries are not unhealthy. They're not blameful boundaries. They don't say, this is all your fault, stay over in your quadrant. No, a healthy boundary says, there's some part of me that doesn't quite have the skill to deal with this in another way. So I have to draw this line, not only for myself, but for you also. Because most of the time, your healthy boundaries are not about keeping people out and away from you. It's about protecting other people from your own instabilities, from your inability to maintain your own ethical base. Somebody speaks harshly to you, curses at you, calls you names, and everybody tells you, you got to put up a boundary to that. You can't allow people to talk to you that way. What they're actually saying to you, but they're not doing it very eloquently at all, is they're saying, you haven't learned how to say no to that. So you need to put up that boundary until you do. There's this beautiful saying on it's like this meme going around now, I guess. Everything is a meme now, isn't it? And it says, you are teaching people how to treat you by what you allow them to do. You are teaching people how to treat you by what you allow them to do. Your boundaries don't have much to do with other people. They have to do with you. So we can stop putting them up and pretending that it's because everybody else is to blame. When we're cleaning out the heart and the mind, we're recognizing that. Does that make sense? Yeah, it changes things a little bit, doesn't it? It sure does. Changes things a little bit. We get very shy, very coy, very kind of soft-spoken when we're around intimidating people who have some kind of big personality. And then that sense of smallness gets carried forward into other relationships. And then we start to feel like we're insignificant in comparison. And that leads us to not being able to state what it is that we need and to take the steps necessary to acquire those things for ourselves. So find your voice. Find your voice, but not the voice in the way that is the ego pushing, forcing, manipulating, but the voice that is in the way of a healthy mind, a healthy ego, and a healthy heart. It says, I know I need these things. Not quite sure how to get them right now. So boundary goes in place while I do the work of discovery, while I do the work of learning. As a result of all of that work, initially discomfort comes because it's not comfortable. But eventually contentment comes. Eventually contentment comes, santosha. Eventually we become much, much more content because we begin to eliminate our dependency on the chaos of the world. We begin to eliminate the part of us that gives way to the push and pull of the outer influences. We begin to eliminate that. And as we eliminate the control that we've given away, we start to rein it in, start to reclaim our own power over our own self. There is a strong contentment that comes with that. Anybody in here not want to be the master of your own destiny? Show of hands? Not one hand went up. That's something that every single person has said many, many times in their life. I want to be in control of my own destiny. I want to be in control. I want to be the one in control, but you are the one in control. However, we give away so much of our power, of our agency, of our authenticity. We give it away so much, so freely, just because someone says something to us. that we become so malcontent. So when we start to clean the mind, when we start to clear the heart, that is a recapturing, a reclaiming of our agency. And that leads us to contentment, because then we really do reclaim the ability to be the master of our own destiny. It doesn't mean that life isn't going to happen to you. It doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen in that world out there that are really uncomfortable and painful. What it does mean is that you take hold of your own self and decide how you will deal with it, how you will work through it, how you will accept it, deny it, whatever, on your own terms. And not because some other person made you feel small. Not because some other person gave you a hard time. Not because some other person told you what to do. Whatever it is that you meet on this path of life, you meet it on your terms. And if your sadhana, if your spiritual practice becomes very well placed in your life, then what you will meet any circumstance with will be the 10 ethics. Non-violence, non-stealing, truthfulness, economy of energy, non-grasping, cleanliness, contentment, discernment and discipline, self-study, and a sense of devotion. But if you don't have your spiritual sadhana as having a great importance in your life, then what you will meet chaos with is chaos, helplessness, and all those other things that will do nothing but deepen your sense of suffering. It's a big conversation, isn't it? It really is, yeah. And it's scary. You know, it is. A long time ago, early on, when I first started teaching, what seems like many, many decades ago, I became resolved almost immediately to know that this conversation isn't for everybody. It's totally not. And that as I was beginning to teach, and this has always been where my heart has been called to, is to teach this. Yes, I'd love to teach the asana too, and the meditation and whatnot, but this approach to life, this wisdom, you know, the wisdom of yoga, the wisdom of Advaita Vedanta and all of the other traditions of India, what we call India. I realized that you can have 30 people in a room for part 1. Half will come back for part 2. Another half will come back for part 3. And only a few will come back for the 4th installment. Because it's that heavy. It's that, and heavy isn't even really the word. It's that true. It's absolutely that true that, you know, talking about these things awakens something within each and every one of us that can be very scary. Because it's almost as if we're saying, like, I'm going to be 60 this year. So if I was just introduced to these concepts, I'm looking back at the 59 years preceding and saying to myself, what was I doing all that time? And then get scared and say, well, I'm not listening anymore. But there is a very valid answer that can support a person in going further. And that answer is, those 59 years were preparing me for right now. Those 59 years have not been wasted. Those 59 years were not for nothing. Those 59 years were not a lie. Those 59 years it was none of those things. Those 59 years were preparation. So that right here, right now, I could sit with some semblance of attention and listen and hear something that would touch my heart, that would change my mind. That's just the truth of the matter. So we don't have to run when we hear something that's a bit spiritually heavy or or scary. Instead, we can say, everything up until now has prepared me for this. So let me listen. Let me listen. And that's tapas. That's the third niyama. That's the discernment, the discipline to stay in that seat and to not leave, to hear it out, to not have crass judgment, spiritual woohoo, to not dismiss things that in your heart, if you were listening to your heart, you would not be dismissing. It's just so true, but the ego says, well, that's not going to get me attention. That's not going to get me what I want. Be afraid of it. Be afraid of it. The unhealthy ego comes right in and sabotages. And the heart says, until you choose me over that, that's what you're stuck with. So in that regard, learn discipline. Don't be afraid of it. Learn discernment. Don't be afraid of it. It's not a 4-letter word. I feel more and more in this country of ours, and potentially all around the world, but we're here, so we'll talk about the United States. Potentially more and more, discipline is becoming a 4-letter word. And it's like, it's not a 4-letter word, it's 7? It's got so much more potential than that, Is it 7? I don't know. Somebody do the math. Might be 8, actually. But anyway, discipline means, point blank, I am the master of my own destiny. My destiny lies solely in my decisions. And so I'm going to cultivate the discipline and discernment necessary to make the decisions that are most aligned with where my heart is calling me. And your heart is only calling you one place. Some of us say, my heart calls me to India, my heart calls me to Ireland, my heart calls me to Machu Picchu, my heart calls me to service. Whatever, those are all really beautiful. They really are. But your heart only calls you one place. And that's home to yourself. That's the capital Y yourself, not the little y. Calls you home to you. You as a reflection, as part of, as an expression of the sacred. It calls you home to you, to your potential. And all those other places are wonderful, But if you're not here, you're not going to be there either. You'll just be taking pictures and having fun. Or what your ego is telling you is fun, And not, by all means, I'm not down on vacations. I love them. Go on vacation. Go have fun. Go try to de-stress. But remember, vacations don't de-stress you, actually. Mm-hmm. Right? Do they? Now, we come back, we're like, I need a vacation from my vacation. Mm-hmm. If you go away on vacation, make sure that you're practicing your ethics. That you're taking time to explore and have fun, but that you're also taking time to restore so that you don't come back even more depleted. Even more depleted. And always remember that if you're not here now, you're not going to find yourself there either. Unless you have a moment where you suddenly decide that you're going to practice the yama, the niyama, the discipline necessary, the discernment. You sit yourself down, and it's not because you're in Ireland or Machu Picchu. It's because you made a decision. And you can make a decision anywhere. It doesn't have to have a fancy name associated with it, or an exotic name, or any name. It's your decision-making capacity. And without discernment and discipline being cultivated in your own being, your decisions will be wishy-washy. Sometimes you'll make the best decision possible, and other times, most times, you won't. Because instead of being concerned with what is good and right and aligned in some higher way, we'll be concerned with what will they think of me? What will she think of me? What will he think of me? How will they see this? We'll put it out there into the world of chaos instead of bringing it in here to the truth. And so we lose the capacity to be good decision makers. How many of you are really great decision makers? You always follow the inner voice of your own self? Yeah, nobody's hand went up, right? How many of you are invested in what other people think? Yeah. How many of you would like not to be? Yeah, totally. So the discipline is to state that to yourself. So say after me. As of right now, I will practice the discipline of self-responsibility. I will look less and less upon others to make my decisions for me.
You just took the question I had and just answered it. Just like that.
I didn't. She did. It's just my mouth moving. That's all. Yeah. That's tapas. When we come into a yoga class, we practice tapas. So oftentimes tapas is kind of devalued down to sweat. I mean, there's a symbology there to be had for sure, but don't stop there. If you're a yoga teacher, please don't stop there, because then it becomes completely misunderstood. The reality is that in the yoga class, we get onto the yoga mat and the teacher says warrior one, and you're like, oh, good time to go to the bathroom. Right? So the first discipline that's cultivated through tapas is the discipline to stay. Is the discipline to not go to the bathroom. The second discipline is to listen to the instructions given by the teacher and not jump ahead. Teacher says, prepare for warrior one. Prepare for warrior one. She didn't say, hop on into that full-blown pose. No, prepare for warrior one. So listen to what the teacher is saying to you and don't jump ahead. So the discipline of staying and maintaining. And then, as she's walking you through the steps of warrior one, do not give up. Allow the weakness to fall away. Allow the disbelief and doubt to fall away. Allow the critical self-insults to fall away. Allow whatever those things are that you're carrying with you to fall away. Come into the tapas of that destruction. The beautiful destruction that prepares the space necessary for the lotus flower to emerge. So the discipline to stay, the discipline to maintain attention and awareness, and then the discipline to allow that which is not useful to fall away, to make space for that which is. That's the discipline of your yoga mat. Is there sweating involved? Darn right there is. Physical sweating, mental sweating, egotistical sweating. I really want to go to the bathroom now. She's holding us here too long. And it's like, no, she's not holding you anywhere. Her hands are on her own self. You're staying because there's a battle going on inside. There's part of you that wants to stay for the 6 minutes for whatever reason it might be. It could be because you want to prove to yourself you can do it. Could be because you want your teacher to be happy. Could be because you know that there's a benefit there for you if you build the resiliency to stay. And then the other side of that battle is, get the hell out of here. This teacher's nuts, 6 minutes in a posture. Y'all should come to yin. 9 minutes in a posture. Yeah. So tapas is the discipline that you can absolutely learn on your mat and then carry out into life with you. It's the first time that you have been practicing the yoga of discipline on the mat, and now you're, and on the meditation cushion and listening in wisdom circle, and now you're starting to carry it out into the world, and it's the first time that you take that and you run into that person. That person that makes your blood pressure go, that makes your hands shake, that makes you recoil because you think there's going to be a confrontation. So now you apply everything you've learned in a disciplined way to stay steadfast in the space of peace, in the space of unity, in the space of less reaction, not non-reaction, because that's not realistic. You're already reacting, So not non-reaction, but less reaction. Person walks past you, looks at you, and you just keep walking. You don't need to be snarky. You don't need to trip them. You don't need to insult them. You don't need to do anything. You just keep walking. And then then all of a sudden, because you practiced this beautiful discipline and you kept your energy to yourself, you didn't waste it on confrontation for, especially for no purpose. Then all of a sudden, as you're walking that way and they're going that way, there's this release. And you feel giddy. You feel like you have to laugh. You feel like relief. And so you can't help yourself. You start giggling. And then the person turns around and says, "Are you laughing at me?" Because that's their insecurity. And you turn around and say, "No, I'm not laughing at you. Actually, I'm kind of laughing at us together. Because I just want us to be peaceful. May you be peaceful. May I be peaceful. And may we stop this silliness. Have a blessed day. And then keep walking." I guarantee you will feel weight come out of that basket, off your shoulders. Your heart will feel so much clearer. You may shake like there's an earthquake going on initially as your nervous system renegotiates itself to this new approach to confrontation, but it's a great thing. But it can only be had through discipline. Only. If you don't cultivate discipline within yourself, then you will give way to the insults and the curses and the fights. That's what happens when there's no discipline, is that there's chaos. So the tapas lends itself to svadhyaya. And svadhyaya is inherently present in the tapas. It has to be. It's inherently present in all of the other virtues. The self-study. Looking at one's own self. And saying, where does my work reside? Where am I falling short from my alignment? My realignment? Where am I being a little lazy? Where am I being a little overbearing? Where am I lacking in devotion? Where have I taken God out of the picture? What am I in relationship to God? That's the highest question. The highest question in self-study is, what am I in relationship to that? That's the highest question. But you got to go through all those other questions first. And then those other questions have multiple layers to them as well, that as you become more and more comfortable with inquiring, what does the Bhagavad Gita tell me about myself? What does the Bible tell me about myself? What does the Quran tell me about myself? What does whatever scripture it is that I follow tell me about who I am in relationship to that? And inevitably, you're going, depending on the book, you're going to get a plethora of answers. So we're so literary, like we're literal. We take the words and we say, it said this, out of 700 and some odd pages. It said this. And it's like, okay, maybe that's the answer that you're seeing right now, but keep your heart and mind open to the possibility that there's a lot more than that little tiny bit that you're attaching yourself to. Ask yourself, why am I attaching myself to this quarter of a sentence when there's hundreds of pages of wisdom here for me? Now, as time goes on and as your spiritual sadhana deepens and becomes set as the foundation in this life, inevitably, no matter what tradition you come from, that you study, you're going to come to the same answer across the board. What am I to that? I am that. That is me. No matter whether you are in a non-dualistic or a dualistic tradition, if you believe that that is your creator, then you are that because it created you. So you are the expression of that coming forward in this world. If you're a non-dualist, then you come to realize that I am that. That is right here within me. And I'm keeping it caged, like a bird in a cage, only letting it out when I feel it's convenient. So maybe I need to allow that energy, that beautiful sacred energy, to be what guides me more. And tell the ego, shh, quiet for a little while. Just be quiet for a little while. And explore what is already within you. But we have to go through all the other steps first. Because all that sounds very wonderful and romantic, and it's all very true, but if we haven't cultivated the skill of nonviolence, non-stealing, non-grasping, truthfulness, economy of energy, cleanliness, contentment, discipline, self-study, and devotion, then it is only ever going to remain a romantic notion. We have to cultivate all those other skills in order to come into a place where our nervous system can handle that truth. Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna said to Krishna, show me your true form. You've told me all this. I get the impression you've been around forever. And that you're not what I think you are. So show me what you are. I can imagine Krishna being like, I don't know, You have a sadhana, but is your nervous system ready for this? I'm not sure. But he shows him. Krishna shows him the effulgence of his self. I love the picture where Krishna is like huge, and bright and lights, and Arjuna's like this, and he's cowering. He's like, could you put it all away? Can you go back to a form that I can deal with right now? Even though this ultimate truth sounds amazing and romantic and wonderful, it's too much for us right now. Too much for us. Because most of us have not cultivated the skills necessary to let it be what it is. We have to cultivate the 10 virtues so that we can hold space for that immense truth and not run away from it in fear or dive toward it as an escape or misunderstand it as an unhealthy ego or try to manipulate it out of greed or any of those things. How do we do that? How do we become ready? Practicing all these other virtues is the 10th. Ishvara Pranidhana. God consciousness through devotion. Cultivate devotion. Cultivate relationship with that. There's some very lofty ideas we could talk about in non-duality versus duality. We're not going to do that. We're just going to say that if you sit down every day, many, many times, never mind your human schedule, you just say, in this moment, I'm going to turn the television off 30 seconds sooner. I'm going to turn the computer off 1 minute sooner. And you start there, use the 30 seconds, use the 1 minute to close the eyes and pray. Whatever your language of prayer happens to be. Tomorrow, turn the television off 1 minute sooner, turn the computer off 1 minute, 30 seconds sooner. And then in that time, close your eyes and just be. Just breathe. Pray. Take your mala out, do some japa. The next day, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. Keep building it up and keep doing it throughout the day until you come to understand that it's not, I have a job and then I have devotion. I have kids and a family and then I have devotion. I have worldly responsibilities and over here I have devotion. So, I get to the temple once a week. I get to church once a week. I pray every night for 5 minutes before I go to bed. Nope. Your job, your family, your worldly responsibilities are part of your devotion. There's no difference between them. The way you care for your children is the way you're caring for God. The way you do your job is the way you serve God. The way you treat your friends, the way you treat your enemies, is in that very moment exactly the way you are treating God. The way you look at nature with adoration is the way you are looking at God. The way you take out your garbage is the way you treat God. The way you brush your teeth is the way you treat God. Every single moment is that relationship. Ishvara Pranidhana, on kind of a first level, is coming into an understanding of that. It's not a timing thing. Time is a human-made construct. It's not real. It's useful, but it's not real. There is no time for devotion except now. There is no time to come into relationship with divinity except now. Next Thursday doesn't matter. Next Sunday doesn't matter because it might never get here. And we don't want to be in that situation where on our last breath we say, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, the beautiful Devi says to Shiva in the Devi Mahatmya, let them just think of me in their last moment. Let them just think of me. And that's all it will take. As that last breath is taken, if their heart and mind belong to me, then they come to me. But the problem is that we live our life in such a way that it's not often possible to think of only that in our last moment. We're too worried about what we shoulda, coulda, woulda done. Does that mean we don't go to God? No, that's not what that means. It means that there's a heavy karma that guarantees that we come back here again. That we're reborn into yet another body. And then another body, and then another body. And then one lifetime we decide, we say, 10 virtues it is. Okay, let's do it. And then every moment we serve God. Everything we do is a service to God. And in that life, that final moment comes. And because our whole life has been spent thinking of nothing but God and how to love God and how to serve God and how to express God, in the last moment, of course, that's all we're going to think about. And then maybe we do still come back after that. But we come back in a different condition. According to these teachings, reincarnation is real. According to these teachings, we then come back in another condition. We come back in the condition of the awakened. We come back in the condition of a human being who knows the truth of their being and can lead others to know that truth also. We come back in a different station. Look at Amma, right? The mother Amma. People like that, living saints who, with a simple glance, they can change you. The way you perceive yourself in the world with a single glance. Ishwar Pranidhana. That's what prepares us for that last breath. But it's also the key to reducing our attachment to our suffering as we make our way through this life. The more that we come into service of divinity, the less we mind when things are inconvenient, when things are painful. Certainly we go through the throes of these things, absolutely. But we recognize, we recognize that there's something here that I can offer. There's something here that I can offer. All of this, for whatever reasons that it's happening, if I surrender to it and just offer it as yet another sacrifice to that. It's not saying that the pain of our humanness won't still be there, but it will be different. It'll be much different. So we have the 5 yamas and we have the 5 niyamas. And they're guidelines. They're the pavers on the path of life, They're the building blocks for our self-knowledge. They're necessary for self-realization. They're the ingredients that are going to, if people practice them, set the tone for the way the world becomes. Because the world becomes what we look at, what we make of it. This world is exactly the way it is, exactly because of us, individually and communally. Communally, you can't do very much about. You can't tell people how to think or what to feel and have them follow what you say. So we don't have so much control there. But where we do have control is the world that we ourselves create. And while we might walk through this world sometimes feeling rather hopeless, thinking everything is kind of in dismay and not salvageable, that makes it so. Just as if you walk through this world and see the beauty of the flower blossoming, or the love in a child's laughter, or the celebration of love in whatever capacity it is that you share and receive that, then that will be your world. And it really is just as simple as that. What do you see? What are you putting there? And it's not usually all or nothing. These are processes that we go through. There's 1 year where you see the world as amazing, inspiring, beautiful, And then the next year something happens and you see it as dreadful and horrible. And the next year something else will happen. And these are the changes that we go through in our humanness. They're great fluctuations, like the roller coaster of life, right? It's crazy. Any of you ever go to Great Adventure in New Jersey? Mm-hmm. Right? What they used to call that lightning loops thing? And then they had the other one, was it something of terror? I don't know, right? And it was too, right? You go on there and it's like, oh my gosh, or the runaway train. Right? This is life. Ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. Well, if that's the way life is, then why bother, doing anything other than being thrown around by it? Because your own innermost self is not the outside world in its craziness and its fluctuating chaos. Your innermost self is peace, no matter what's happening out there. Your innermost self is always capable of love, of unity, of joy, of gratitude. Your innermost self is always capable of standing strong, even in the midst of an earthquake. Your innermost self is not shaken, not rattled at all. It's the outer self that is. Invest more in the inner self, and what happens in the world will not be as impacting. Instead of cursing it, instead of feeling victimized by it, you'll look for where support is needed. You'll look for where love is needed, where the reality of love and peace would support healing, and you'll go be that. But you have to have the virtues as the foundation to be strong enough to do it. If you don't have the virtues as a foundation, where does the strength come from? It doesn't. And if you do muster some amount of strength, it won't last. It'll run out. Burnout syndrome, such a big thing, right? Why is there burnout syndrome? Because so many things are being done for less than reasons. But when we come into the virtues, and that's the reason why we're doing things, and we have an endless supply of energy, because we're not taking ownership over the outcome. We're saying this is all an offering. This is all an offering. You're up from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. anyway, So don't tell me you don't have time. You have nothing but time. Nothing but time. Mindset. Practice your yamas and niyamas and let them guide you. Any questions or reflections? Yes?
Okay, always. I have
That's fine. You can have all the questions you want.
So, okay, back to the discipline. And like your example was like, you get kind of flippant, like, oh, I messed up. That's not, like, I'm working on certain things that probably are challenging for a lot of people, like reactivity, and making that pause.
Good.
But I fail some days, and
that's okay.
I've not ever come from the flippant side of it, but I also don't want to go to that other ego-driven, like, I can't do this then because it's hard. So I want, like, you gave us that little mantra to repeat, which was like, you were in my head, or she was in my head. And how do you, like, what would you suggest to maintain that discipline while you're forging that new tributary that sometimes is made of frozen ground?
Yeah.
That you turn it into the blessing? Are you just looking at it like using the devotion part of it? Okay.
Yeah. And to also realize that to be flippant about things like that is to disregard the intention. Don't disregard your own intention. Recognize the difficulty and honor it. And also accept the reality that in some way, shape, or form, you're partly responsible for that frozen ground. Certainly there may have been other influences, but in some way, shape, or form, you're also partly responsible. So what went around is coming back around again. And just accept the responsibility of that. In the Vivekachudamani, it states, the wise one is the one who recognizes that all this is simply karma playing itself out. They do not become involved in the play. They just watch. They don't take it for their own. So as you're forging your path, creating this new tributary for yourself, just recognize that the frozen ground is karma. That the ability to create a new tributary is also karma. That the frustration is karma. That the celebration is karma. That the hope is karma. That the hopelessness is karma. That it's all karma. And don't be involved in that. Let it come and let it go. You can't stop your emotions. If you did, you'd have some problems. So don't think that. That's not what that means. It doesn't mean become stoic. What it means is don't take ownership over it. Let the emotions come and let them go. Don't react to them. Don't be snarky to them. Don't be like, well, love is welcome here, but hate you're not. Yeah. Don't be dualistic like that. Just let them come and go as they will and don't act on them. Just keep laying down your ethics. Just keep practicing. Practice and all is following. All comes from that. But if you stop to address the frustration and then you wallow in the frustration, that's time lost. And frustration is like an ivy plant. You go out to the store and you buy this little cute ivy plant because, it's just so pretty, right? How many of you have ever been to Ireland? Did you see the ivy in Ireland? That started from a little plant, right? That's like frustration. Frustration starts with a little seed, and pretty soon it's taking over buildings. The building of your heart and mind. So don't interact with it necessarily. Now, take that just with a little bit of a grain of salt because there are things you do have to interact with, like your own traumas. Mm-hmm. You do have to interact with that. You do have to sit with that and come to a place of acceptance. And by acceptance, I'm not saying accepting, no. It's simply accepting that it happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's saying, this brick fell down on my foot, bruised my toe, I'm jumping up and down, cursing, screaming, whatever it happens to be because it hurts. That's the acceptance. The acceptance is saying, yes, this did happen. And I'm looking directly at the consequences of that. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to pretend. And I'm going to look at the consequences of it, what I perceive it has done to me, and work through that. So there are things that you do have to address, that you do have to sit with. But most of the time there's not. Most of the time we're just kind of bored and we're like, oh, remember last week when that person was a real jerk at the store? And then we just tell ourselves the story over and over again. That's time you could have been doing japa. It's time you could have been doing yagna, homa. It's time you could have been talking to God and saying, oh, why do I think like that? It's okay. You can talk to God and you can talk out loud to God. It's perfectly fine. If people think you're crazy, let them. You're the one with the direct line, right? So use it. Use it. Absolutely. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or reflections?
I come from a Wan Buddhist tradition, which is a Korean tradition, and many of what you've said is exactly what I'm studying and practicing in my life. And what I'm hearing today is the attachment to things, and I've heard over and over and over again in my practice, and it's one of the probably hardest things to let go of. Any attachment to any thought, to any action, our ego wants to grasp onto it and make us suffer because of it.
Absolutely.
No matter what it is, even if it's something good, you know.
Yeah, sometimes that's even worse.
I want that good again. Yeah.
Sometimes that's even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank
Absolutely.
you for bringing it all together.
Oh, you're very welcome. Have you ever taken ivy off of things? Like, or vine? Yeah.
Like imprints on stuff.
It's like, you gotta, for every vine that you pull, there's 10 more that magically appear. It's like, where were they, you know?
Go deep.
They go deep.
Yeah.
It does. And that's our attachment too.
Yeah.
It's messy work. It really is. So be okay with that, you know? Just be okay with the fact that, like, none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect. You know, not in our human self, there's not. But the innermost self, the spiritual self, of course, that's perfect. But that's beyond our comprehension in this moment in time. So just know that it's messy and be okay with getting messy. You know, I love when there's these, you know, parents who have kids, right? And they take them out for ice cream. Right? Now, my granddaughter is 8 now, right? And she's still, you know, it's still messy. You know? But it's cool because she loves it. She has fun with it. So what if it gets all over her shirt, you know? But when she was little, when my grandson was little, they like have it all over their face and all over their hands, and you know, and I would see so many parents at the ice cream parlor, and they'd have these napkins all over their children, you know, and you know, smocks and stuff. And they'd be wiping the you know, as they're eating it, they're wiping it. And it's like, stop. That's not real. That's not, life is messy. Let your kid get messy. Let them get messy. Because then they start to learn things. But if you're constantly cleaning it up for them, they're not learning very much. You know, they're learning that you'll clean it up for them. So let them get sticky. Right?
Yeah. And it's not only, that spoke so much to me, because it's not only that they'll clean it up for you, it's that it needs to be clean.
Right.
Right? Like, so, I mean, I have learned these teachings over the years in so many ways, and I thank you so much, because the reminder of the teachings again and again and again is so powerful.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things I'm realizing is I've gotten so stuck in trying to be in that clean place, right?
Yeah.
But to clean up your mess means you have to acknowledge your mess and allow the mess and go through the mess,
Yeah.
so that you can clean it up.
Right.
And that requires the discipline. And so that right there is just like, okay, more discipline, so I can let myself go through the mess and clean up after myself. You know?
And what is the cleanup really? What is the cleanup? The cleanup is detachment.
Yeah.
You know, you ever see like a model walking down the runway and she's got like this big, beautiful cloak, right? And as she goes, she unties it and lets the cloak go. That's the cleanup. I let go of these thoughts. I let go of this attachment. I let go of the idea of that. I let go of the belief in that. I let go of that anger. It's the detachment. That's the cleaning up. Totally. So it's like you walk through the mess and you let go of the mess. And then you're no longer attached to the mess, and it's no longer your mess. Yay! Yay, God. It's your mess. Have fun. And God's like, whatever. You know? Yeah.
Well, I have a very long, complicated story that will shorten. It just happened last week. And I'll try to make it simple, and I'll cut some things out to get there. But I happen to be in an isolated area of Mexico on my way to this event with a mom and her daughter. And the roads, fast, it was dirt, some rocks. Anyway, there was a turnoff from one road to another. more narrow, more rocks, more dirt. And the vehicle slid a little bit. There was no room for error. It turned out there was a very deep sinkhole, and it, about that deep, I think.
Wow.
So we went off into the sinkhole, and the front of the car, I was not driving. The mom happened to be driving at that moment. So it was pointed down in the sinkhole, and the other end of the car was lifted up, pointed up the other way. So it was like a 45-degree angle. And as we were going into that, it felt like slow motion. And the thoughts were very clear in my head. Like I was not panicked. And before, in that transition, I had a very clear thought of, first of all, accepting what was happening. This is what's happening. So there was no shock to it. This is what's happening, and somehow made peace with that. And then there was like a transition into a sense of responsibility for that. I wasn't driving, but that didn't matter. It's in alignment with what you were talking about. I did have that ownership. And once we were done moving for that moment, it was a quick assessment to make sure we weren't going to continue to move somehow, and then if that was stable, then it was okay. Physically, what are these folks doing? Emotionally, where are we? So then I proceeded to, help them get out. So physically, everybody was fine. Emotionally, the two girls needed some support. I was able to provide that support. It was to basically let them know it was okay. First of all, here we are, we're okay. Hugs. And then there was a family who happened to have their house like right there on the opposite side of that street, and they came out. And socially, economically, about as poor as you can get financially. And it was all very interesting. So once there was some stability emotionally, and they came out, the beautiful little girl came out, and there were chickens running around. So in my mind, I had peace from that. It's like, what a pretty little girl. Look at those chickens running around. This is beautiful. What a nice family coming out, to check on us and everything. And then everybody sort of settled down, thinking, well, what do we do now? And it'll work out. And it did.
Mm-hmm.
And it took about 3 hours, but it did. And the woman, it was a multi-generational family in this small shack, really. And at some point, the older, the mom or the grandmom, I think, brought out this tea. And it was a cup of very, very bitter tea. And she had explained that it's to help, calm your nerves. I had a few spoonsful. It was very, very bitter. But it tasted incredibly sweet because of what this woman was doing. And I shared that with the other girls, and said, it is really, really bitter, but, try a spoonful or two. And they did. And so it was very helpful. All said and done, I have to skip some parts, or this will drag out forever, but after a lot of transactions of things, and the car, we got it out with help, and that was a whole thing unto itself. However, by the time we were said and done with that, flat broke, no more pesos, and the road that we were going down was a prohibited road that required permitting. We weren't supposed to be on the road. That prevented us from going down that road. I don't know what the consequences would have been of going down that road had we not gone in the sinkhole. But as it turns out, I would have taken a right, not a left, had I gone down that road. It turns out the left is the way that you wanted to go, not the right. I don't know why. And the individual, one of the individuals in that home led us down the road. So we had an escort. So whatever the issues were, it was no longer a problem. So we prevented, I don't know what was prevented or not prevented, but it worked out. Possibly for the better, who knows? And I found a few pesos, some coins left in the car that were not spent in that whole drama. And I tried to offer it to the women of the house, and they wouldn't accept the money. No. But I saw that they had a little infant, newborn. So I said, please, for the baby. And they did then accept it for the baby. So there was a lot of things that happened there, and a lot that I can't get into, but I just thought I would share that experience, and a lot of it just goes right into the discussion today.
Yeah, what a beautiful.
How we can deal, and it wasn't about me. It was about every single other individual and the chickens,
And the chickens.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm glad everybody was okay,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you took away from it what you took away from it. That's cultivating discipline within ourselves, and all of these other virtues can empower us. That even in something like that, where you're potentially facing some significant injuries, if not maybe death, that you can still remain contained, whole, understanding, accepting, purposeful, compassionate, kind.
Appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then even thankful for the things that came out of that would not have been experienced had that not happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's sit tall and we'll close the eyes. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So good to see each and every one of you. Wonderful to gather with you. Thank you. I do think they're still serving lunch, so if you haven't had brunch yet, please enjoy. Give them all some love. They work so hard. And as you go about your day, be well. Cultivate your virtues. Remember also, they're your virtues. They're not to be pushed off on other people. They have to figure that out for themselves. Very good.